for me, the best advice I could give is to trust yourself, to trust that your heart is big enough to hold it. And I know that it can feel like you are on your knees and you are never going to feel better. And that panic, I've been there, that panic of when the mind kicks in and it's like, what if I'm like this forever and I feel this low forever? And you don't.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. So I am joined today by the incredible Jill Ritchie. Jill is a life coach who's worked with over 1,000 people, including celebrities, athletes, and public figures. And she's also the co-founder of the Intuitive Psychology Association. And this is the world's first and only fully accredited intuitive psychology coach training program. She's also the host of the award-winning and incredibly empowering She Loves Herself podcast. And I regularly tune into this. And actually, just to note, She Loves Herself has got a really, really profound season all about grief. And it's really beautiful to me how I can bring people in to conversation here who've really been catalysts in my own journey. And Jill really is one of them. So just like how when Tree Carr, who Jill also knows, and Tree's guested on Jill's podcast, when she was on my podcast recently, I shared that she was the one who told me to go for it in my death doula training journey. Jill did exactly the same for me in my coach training journey. It was Jill who said to me, take that leap, you won't regret it. And then she walked with me as I prepared to leave Formula One and exit into this path where I am now. And I have so much love for Jill, and I'm so excited to see where we flow in conversation. So Jill, welcome to Death on the Daily.
Oh, Tanya, what a beautiful introduction. I had goosebumps when you were saying that, mostly for the part where you shared about how we connected in your journey, and just witnessing you and your journey to leave Formula One to create what you created and are continuing to create is so beautiful. It's such a privilege to watch you. So thank you for having me on Death on the Daily podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jill. I'm so excited for you to be here. And also to that point of that journey and you being that catalyst for it, you just got me thinking that was at a moment of real death for me, the death of my career, and also that being inspired by my own grief. So I love these full circle moments. We're coming full circle back around, and to bring you into this space now, into a conversation with you about what Death on the Daily means to you. So with that in mind, let's talk about Death on the Daily, because actually, for both of us, we've had very poignant weeks this week. For me, it was the 1-year birthday of my daughter who we lost last year. And obviously for you as well, you've been celebrating your mum. So I'd just love to hear more, if we root ourselves into sort of where we are now with our Death on the Dailies. I'd love to hear what's coming up for you right now in this space.
Thank you. Okay, so even just hearing those words, Death on the Daily, do you know, the obvious one is that yesterday, so it was 2 years since my mum passed away. But when I actually closed my eyes when you said the words Death on the Daily, and I went Death on the Daily, I actually feel like I have had multiple deaths personally over the past 2 years, but mostly since my mum passed away. 2 years ago, I feel like I've had multiple moments where I felt this this darkness, this shedding, only to almost have that sort of rebirth and moment of, okay, things are starting to make sense again. I knew I needed to let go of things that I was perhaps holding on to. And when we talk about death, it has so many meanings. You know, there's the obvious one of someone, you know, passing away and leaving us But actually, gosh, there's so many ways that we can actually look at that, because sometimes when we're in a moment of change, transformation, whether that's at work, in your business, in relationships with people, a personal sort of transformation, something that you're going through personally, it can feel like a death. It can feel like you have no control, you don't know what's going on, you can feel poorly within yourself. And so and I do see this happening a lot with people when I'm having conversations. They're like, I'm feeling really low. I'm feeling like there's so many things that are not resonating with me in my life anymore. People, situations, business. And there's this real need as a human to cling on to what was, because we want to be able to control, right? We can't see or we can't foresee what's going to happen. So there's not that almost certainty of safety. What does life look like if I let go of this person or this situation or this narrative that I'm telling myself? But over on the other side, even though it can feel painful to navigate, there is a real sense of expansion and freedom. And so just when you said that, I know even personally for me, that's come up a lot since my mum passed away. I feel like when she left this earth plane, even though I feel connected to her, when I create a space and ask for her support and spirit, it's not the same as having her here as a human. I can't hold her. I can't touch her. So I don't have that comfort that I do crave on a daily basis. But there is something that does change within you when you have a death, you know?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Jill. And what I can really connect into is that catalyst that can come through someone that we love so dearly dying, that then almost, it shines a spotlight in other areas of our life. And I'd love to hear more around how you sort of walked through those moments, because I know obviously you are really specialized in shadow work and in going to those really difficult places. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about, from your personal perspective, and also perhaps how you work with others.
Yeah.
How is it as you're facing into those spaces that feel quite uncomfortable?
It is uncomfortable. I am not going to sugarcoat it. It is uncomfortable. It's so funny. My business partner will laugh at sometimes because I like to go deep, and she'll say to me, "Oh, you like to go dark. You like to go deep and dark." And I believe that I do. I don't always like the feeling of it, but it's like it's an itch. When I know better, I have to do better, and I feel like there is this knowing that I cannot numb out. I cannot mask it. Well, I could, but there is something within me that's like, you can't do this, Jill. Like, it's this higher self that comes in. It's like, you need to go and you need to walk that path. And I think for me, and I believe for me to be able to support people, I've had to be able to walk that path and continue to, or else how can I possibly hold space for anyone if I've not been willing to go there myself? Because you understand it on such a different level when you've experienced it. And this isn't me saying I know how someone feels when they're in grief. I think every single person feels different. It's so unique and personal to you. And with the shadow parts, but when you at least are willing to go there and work on your shadow, then you can have some sort of understanding and create safety for someone to be able to navigate that part within themselves, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. I can really feel that you walking that path with someone and helping them to create that safety to explore it. And it really resonates, everything that I know about you to that point of going deep and going to those shadowy, those dark places, I know that's you, and I can always feel that courage to go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you were to, so for any listeners who are perhaps tuning in, and maybe they've been through a grief or they've been through any form of loss, because obviously loss can be relationships, it can be careers ending, etc. What would your advice be on how to take those first steps to start exploring that which feels really quite uncomfortable to even just peek into?
For me, the best advice I could give is to trust yourself, to trust that your heart is big enough to hold it. And I know that it can feel like you are on your knees and you are never going to feel better. And that panic, I've been there, that panic of when the mind kicks in and it's like, what if I'm like this forever and I feel this low forever? And you don't. You don't. Your heart is so big and so beautiful. And so often we almost squeeze the cavity of our heart, like we squeeze it, and we're told though, right? As children, like I was brought up in the 80s, so 80s and 90s girl, I'm nearly 45 years old, and certainly for me, it's like, think with your head, not with your heart. Get your head in the game, don't feel sad. And so that was always seen as a sign of weakness, to be emotional, to be with your heart. You can't trust your heart. You've got to be in your head. So of course, if and people wore that as a badge of honor, I'm tough, I'm hard, I don't need anyone. And that was seriously a laugh, because it was a badge of honor. And guess what? That kept me safe. That kept me safe. I had never felt heartbreak from a partner, ever. Like seriously, I was like, I'm so independent. I don't need anyone. I don't need a man. I'm so this and that. And people looked up to me, Tanya, for being that way. And so when I stepped into this work almost 7 years ago, I knew, my life up until that point, I was probably living it, but I was numbing out a lot, and I never let anyone get really close to me because it never felt safe. It never felt safe. And yeah, and so really having to unlearn that and to really trust my heart felt weird at first. But when I realized and I started to drop into my heart more often, I realized that underneath fear, anger, sadness, shame, underneath all of it was love. It was my heart asking to be loved more. And actually, I realized that when I unlayered, I don't feel safe. Okay, what's underneath that fear? What's underneath that? More fear. What's underneath more fear? Dark. What's underneath dark? And as I started to unlayer it, I was like, alone. Okay, what's underneath being alone? Sadness. What's underneath sadness? Emotions. What's underneath emotions? And then eventually I would get to love. And I realized that being able to drop into that and unlayer what was underneath the fear of being with my emotions was just love. It was more of a felt sense. I was able to fully allow myself to feel sad, to feel fear without creating a narrative about it, just feel my feelings, and then just really wrap love around it. And that isn't something that you can do instantly. It was definitely a practice for me. And so for anyone that is in that, I'm scared, because I hear this a lot from people. I'm scared if I go in, I'm not going to come back out and it's going to be too dark. So of course, keeping busy, numbing out, it's a short-term fix. But what happens, and we know this, right, is that it starts to manifest in illness in our bodies and us not being able to communicate our needs. is just pushing every emotion into the body. And what happens is it gets stuck there and it's nowhere to go. And that will come back and bite you in 6 months' time, in 6 years' time, in 16 years' time, but it's coming. It never goes away. And when we understand that it's just energy and motion, emotion, and that we have a beautiful big heart that can hold it, and that you are going to be okay, the tears will dry up and they might come back again. But when you can understand how to be with your emotions and love them, then it does get easier. It gets easier.
Oh, I love that. Understanding to being with your emotions, but also that acknowledgement that everything is impermanent. That even when you feel like you're in the bottom of that pit, there's always that time where you will be coming out of it. I think that's such beautiful wisdom and advice. And actually, as you were sharing it, I really connected into some of your really profound shares that you shared just after your mum passed. And I know you went on a solo trip as well to Bali. And I just remember that the visceral shares that came through from you that I just thought was exactly the conversations that we need to be having. And actually for us to witness you and that sort of the rebirths that then come and that impermanence of everything, you know, that for me, actually, I think that was as I was navigating my granddad's final chapter. And that was my first window in to the realness of grief. I don't think I'd ever seen it sort of shared, you know, in podcast, in social media form, etc., in that really authentic way, in a way that was aligned to you as well, as and when you were ready to share that. But I thought that was really, really, really profound. And then obviously to witness everything that has sprouted since and sort of that continued transformation with that openness that you bring, I think is
Yeah.
really, really wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. And when you mentioned Bali, I've actually booked to go back to Bali
Oh,
next
wow.
Tanya, so Bali will be almost 2 years ago I went, and I had no idea what was going to happen on that journey. I had a call to go, an inner knowing that I should go, and everyone around me told me not to go. My mum had just passed away. Now, for anyone listening, the relationship I had with my mum was as that was my first love, like my first real love, was to that love that I had with my mum and then subsequently my children. But I I always knew my mum loved me and my sister. We were brought up solely by my mum. My dad was absent. He left a month before I was born, and when my sister was 2, and that had a massive. I didn't realize at the time growing up that had a huge impact on my level of safety with trusting people and letting them in. And it wasn't until I did the deeper work that I'm like, that's why I'm that way. But I always felt unconditionally loved by my mum, but I always had this thing of not feeling safe. And I was like, why is it when I get to a certain point, I would try and access this, and no matter how much work I did and medicines and various different things, I just couldn't access this part of allowing myself to feel fully safe with other people. And when my mum passed away, it was a long journey. So my mum was diagnosed with cancer just as she turned 50, which at the time I remember thinking, oh, 50's older. Like I was younger then. I mean, I'm 45 now. I certainly do not think that's old now. But like she was young. When I look at that now, that's young. And we navigated a 19-year journey of cancer with her. And
Wow.
you go into, oh my goodness, like various different rounds of chemotherapy. It would go away, it would come back. She would fight it again, beat it would go away, it would come back. And then it started to come back in her lungs and her bones and then in her brain. And then she was told, you'll probably have around 12 months. And she got like sort of 6 years after that. And she actually that cancer. She had multiple lesions in her brain. And navigating that was so challenging. And that was probably the hardest because she had to get entire radiotherapy in her brain. But as a unit, we did everything together. So every appointment, every radiotherapy appointment, we were there. Like, and the oncologists, they just knew us. We would walk in, it was like a squad. And we all took our seats and we would take our same seats. It was like a jinx. If we, right, Jill, you sit there. My sister would sit there. My stepdad would sit in another seat because we always, it's like one of those little jinxes, right? We would get good news. So everyone has to sit in their same space when you're waiting on the results. And we're so used to her fighting it and beating it. And it went away for a while. But what actually eventually got my mum was the damage that the radiotherapy caused to her brain. So whilst she actually beat the cancer, the radiotherapy then went on 5 years later to cause her dementia and strokes, multiple strokes. And it was just horrendous. And so all kind of kicked off in lockdown. And that was a difficult time for so many people, but everything sort of went downhill then. And that period was so challenging. And when she passed away, it was honestly like for her, because she was suffering. And for me, I still struggle with how, as a human being, you're left to suffer that way. Like I look at animals and they're never left like that. And for me, if you know, again, this is another conversation, but personally, when you're someone witnessing not only what it does to the individual, but what it does to the family to watch someone who we know is going to go in pain and suffering, and the trauma, the traumatic experience for the family and for her to experience is just so heartbreaking. That was such a challenging time. And I still have to really navigate that because it feels so unfair for someone to live a life who gave so much to have it end that way. And we were there, and you try your best to make it as comfortable as possible. But my mum was really scared to death. My mum really didn't want to die, Tanya. So that was, and I would say, you know, in the work that I did, I would try and say like everything I could. I'm not a death doula, but really try to tap into create safety for her. She was terrified. And so no one talks about it. No one talks about death. And I love that you have your training. I love what Tree does, because I think if we normalize death, because your chance of being born is like 1 in 400 trillion, but your chance of dying is 1 in 100. Like you're 100% you're going to die.
Yeah.
Yet no one talks about it. And I feel like to me, it's like if we talked more about that, people wouldn't fear it so much, because that's the only guarantee that you've got when you're born is that you're going to die. Yet no one talks about it. And I felt like that whole experience was dark. It was a hard time. And when I went to Bali, my family were like, it's too soon, don't do it, you know, stay here. But I knew I would only grieve to a certain level when I was in the UK, because I'm a mum, I've got young kids, and so I can cry in front of them, and I'm much, much more open with my emotions now that I've done this work. But then there comes a point where mum kicks in, and it's like, okay, well, you need to take the kids to swimming, and you need to take the kids to football, and you actually need to work. And so I was like, right, I need to fully feel this. And it wasn't a logical decision. Like the mind was like, nah, you're crazy, don't do it. But there was an inner knowing. My body was like, full body, yeah, you have to go there. And I didn't know why, but I just knew. And I went on that journey, and it was probably the worst experience ever, because from the second I got on that flight, it was hell, but it was meant to be. It was absolutely perfect, because it chewed me up and it spat me back out again. But the person that left is not the same as the person that returned, which sounds quite heavy, but it was profound and it was beautiful, because every attachment that I had to people, situations and things, any ego that I had around who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to show up and all of that just was ripped out from under me. So when we talk about death, I felt like I had a death of everything. It was like I felt fully what I would feel like to have the attachments that I had. And I thought I'd pretty much nailed attachment. No, I definitely didn't. It was like, oh yeah, you think this? Let's just strip it back. But God, universe knew, spirit knew I could handle it. I asked for this and it was the medicine that I needed. But it took me to places that, yeah, I fully felt what I needed to feel and allowed me to come back so much more vulnerable, so much more open with my partner who I've been with for 16 years. We have an entirely different relationship now. I get emotional in front of him, whereas I used to struggle with that. I didn't, I'd get a bit emotional, but then I'd get embarrassed and I would get annoyed at him, like, leave me alone, I'm fine, don't. But now I will cry freely in front of him. I will let him help me. I will ask for help. I will ask for my needs to be met. I parent the kids differently. And I am so much more deeper than I've ever been connected with who I am and my mission in the world because of, number one, my mum passing away. Number two, that Bali trip and subsequently what happened from then. It allowed me to fully drop in and trust and know that if I can handle that, I can handle anything.
Wow, that's so profound. And obviously the Bali trip and that real breaking open and allowing yourself that, well, I guess the Bali trip creating that container for you to really go to the depths of those feelings. And then what is the rebirth that comes after that? I can feel that so profoundly. And as you were speaking, it made me think about, to your point around the numbing and the fact that, in the past that sort of you'd really numb out to things. And I just thought to how many of us, and I've witnessed it as well when I hold space for people in loss, where there's a real moment after someone dies in that grief where I've seen a few times, there's a real clarity of this is what's most important to me in life and I need to make changes, etc. But actually as business as usual creeps back in, and to your point, suddenly it's like, okay, I need to go and get back to picking my kids up from school, and I need to get back to work, and I need to, all these different lists, and get back into the office or whatever it might be, that then that sense, that presence, which I believe is really rooted in feeling and really feeling what's coming up in those moments, that sort of just disappears as that numbing then comes in. And I've witnessed so many people where both clients and then people who I just sort of meet in everyday life, where when they can really stay rooted in those feelings, that actually the magic that can unfold on the other side of it, that I believe is a beautiful legacy to those who have passed. Actually, if they can help us to live our life in deeper alignment and our truth, and speaking our truth and speaking our needs or whatever it might be. When I think of my granddad and then my daughter, I really do attribute that growth in part to them and their legacies and that continued imprint through me on the earth. But actually on the flip side, I get, really sad. And that's why, to your point, these conversations are really important, because I do get sad when I think how many of us do numb out to grief, or particularly for our parents' generations and grandparents, they were the most suppressed, I believe, when it came to talking about death and grief. There's a real change that's coming in the Western world now. But I feel real sadness, because exactly the same with my granddad. He was really fighting to the end, and in part because there was that real deep primal fear that he felt. So yeah, the more that we can speak to it and the more that I think we can hold space and encourage others to feel, I think that's a real key to all of us growing and healing in this world.
Beautiful, beautiful. I felt every word that you said there, and feeling is healing in any capacity. Feeling is healing. I just wish, and my wish, and I'm so glad you're doing what you do, Tanya, because it's really shining a light on those parts that people do suppress. It, and I say, like, it always comes back. Like, it won't go away. So you may numb out for a year. You may be like, okay, I'm just going to do this thing. But guess what? It's like, it'll come and it'll start to manifest in physical illness a lot of the time when we suppress, where we don't feel our feelings. And I get it. I get it. I get how hard it can feel. I get how much you don't want to feel it. And it can feel like, oh, what if I never stop? What if it doesn't stop? But it always does. It always gets, and something is released when you allow yourself to fully feel. And actually, it does create the sense of trust within yourself. Like, I trust that, I'm almost moving this energy, this emotion through, and light will come through, and it always does. It always does. If I had not allowed myself to go there, I probably wouldn't have created what I've created now, in my life and in my business, and be able to show others how to do it. Like, that's it. I see so many people, and you will too, who do numb out, and I do get it. I understand why people do it, but I feel like if they understood that it's not separate from you, it is you. Like, the grief, the sadness, shame, pain, it is not separate from you, and there are no bad parts. And actually, when you realize that it's part of you, it's just a part of you that has been pushed down, pushed down, pushed down. And actually, if you were to come in, almost imagine it as like the inner child, the little 3-year-old or 4-year-old you, and you come in as almost the mom, the parent, and you just hold that energy of that child and allow her or him or whoever that is to just feel and just hold it for them. Imagine that bigger version of you as your heart, like it's just holding the space for you to do it, and it can. But just trust, like really trust that you can do it. Like, you can hold that space. And again, we put such a negative connotation on tears. We're like, oh, I'm crying. Like, I actually said to Tanya before we started recording, I was at the hairdresser's yesterday morning, and I've just started with this new hairdresser, and that's the second time I've been to her. And obviously it was the anniversary of my mum, and I was talking to her and I started to cry, got really emotional. And the first thing I said, and it was just like habit, I went, I'm really sorry. And then I caught myself quickly, and then I said to her again, I don't know why I'm saying sorry. Why do we say sorry? Why do we apologize for feeling our feelings? And it's like, we don't want to burden someone. But that would, to me, those words weren't a representation of how I felt. I wasn't sorry. It was just a habit. And it just shows you how many programs and habits kick off. But when we actually take a pause and check in, we're like, well, are you sorry? No, I'm not sorry. I just said it, catching ourselves again.
Yeah, that those patterns run deep, don't they? And similarly, that reflex that people have of, oh, no, don't cry, as soon as someone cries, as if not crying, as if, as Tree mentioned, around the amount of energy that it takes to suppress tears. And actually, when we punch down on our emotions, that, again, to your point of the physical disease and the everything, mental health, etc., that manifests in our body as a result of it. But that, again, that reflex that we all have, that, again, I'm sure if we really tuned in and thought, actually, do I want to be saying this? And I think, when I look back at where does this all start? It starts in school, doesn't it? It starts in that sort of suppression of any sort of emotions, or, maybe in families, etc. And it really, really does run so deep into our society. But I think that's where we can be brilliant beacons of of that change. And to your point of calling out those inner narratives of saying, why did I say that? Is that my truth? No,
it's
I'm
not.
not sorry at
It's
all.
not.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's habit. But again, it's a program, right? Like you mentioned school. I think even younger than that. Like if you think even as a baby, right? When a baby's crying, and I've done this, shh, 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 shh. You're okay. Shh, shh, shh. Right. So we're shushing the baby straight away. But do you know what? Like, don't anyone listen to this, do not beat yourself up for that. I did it. And I remember even like as the kids would fall, oh, what we get? You're all right. Don't cry. Oh, I cringe at that. I cringe. But it's all learned behavior. But we learn like, oh, this is making my mum feel uncomfortable, or this is making someone else feel uncomfortable, or don't be a baby. Oh, right, I don't want to be a baby, so I better not cry. But when you think of a child, they don't really care. They just scream and they'll cry. And we learn to suppress so early on. And so is it any wonder, and honestly, you feel like laughing when you say it out loud, is it any wonder that everyone struggles with their emotions? But we can, and that's why there is so much disease, there is so much suppression, there is so much anger and frustration in the world, because we're all suppressing the emotions, because it's like, okay, you're allowed to smile and be happy, but don't feel shame, don't feel angry, don't get upset. And it's like, what? No, we're a full spectrum of emotions, and we can start to be with them now. But the only way for me is the more that we can come out of the mind, and drop into the body and start to tune into your own personal emotions without shame, without judgment. Just notice what you notice how you feel, and try, and even if it is a little bit uncomfortable, try, and I'm going to, rather than get up and put TV on, or get up and even go for a run, because again, exercise is amazing, but a lot of the time we numb out with exercise. I'm actually going to sit with this discomfort. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take some breaths, and I'm going to be with, oh, this is uncomfortable. Oh, okay. I'm going to take some more breaths. Oh, okay. And just wait and allow. And for sure, most of the time, the emotion comes through and then it just moves. It just moves through and it leaves. And the more that we can do that, the more trust we cultivate within ourselves, the more safety we feel with our emotions and non-attachment.
That is so important, particularly because we live in the age of distraction, don't we? Everywhere, all of the screens there. It's just surrounds us. And actually, if we want to numb out, there is literally something, an arm's length away from all of us. And I love that as well, of just taking those breaths, because that's definitely something that I connected into, was literally breath by breath. Can I be here for one breath at a time? And to your point, then can I keep breathing into it? And then can I witness? Because that does teach that impermanence. It's impermanent. It will morph, it will evolve, it will change, it will flow. And if you're rooting into, in this age of distraction, because I know that you are really rooted into your personal rituals and creating that space to go inwards, what would you suggest by way of how someone who's maybe new to this space of listening to their inner dialogue, of even acknowledging how busy they are? I had a moment where I had a spiritual teacher a few years ago, and she said to me, okay, when do you have silence in the day? And I was like, oh, all the time. And then she's like, okay, when? And I said, oh yeah, when I'm cooking. She said, but are you listening to something while I'm cooking? Oh yeah, I'm listening to a podcast. And then it turned out, even when I go to the bathroom, I would literally like put a tune on and take my phone in. And I was like, wow, when I'm brushing my teeth, there was no moment of silence in my day. So if you're speaking to anyone who maybe like me, I just literally had that aha moment of, oh my God, I don't allow for that inwards going. What would you recommend when it comes to rituals or practices that people can bring in on the daily to really just sit with themselves and be?
First of all, yeah, I love that you shared that. There are so many people I know that don't even like any silence in their house. They'll just put the TV on for background noise. Yet they suffer with chronic migraines, gut health issues, because they cannot sit still. They cannot actually be in any form of like stillness. And I actually have a friend who's like that, and she like a migraine every day. And I say to her, like, she's always busy. But she will not sit still. It's the most uncomfortable thing for her to sit still. And it is the brain, right? The brain's like, oh, we'll just keep you busy, because actually, you know, if we were to sit, well, what's going to come up in the stillness? But first of all, to say to anyone, peace is so beautiful. Oh, it's so beautiful. Like, even just right now, like, or after this podcast, you finish listening to it, the first thing, even just set a timer on your phone for 1 minute, 60 seconds, right? Put a timer on 1 minute. Take a deep breath, close down your eyes, and just follow your breath. Follow your breath in and out, breathing in, breathing out. And even if you need to say, because that's sometimes really challenging for people, as you breathe in, repeat the mantra internally. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out for 1 minute. Another thing, just notice how challenging, don't judge yourself. Again, another one for me, I always say to people, close down your eyes, because even just closing down your eyes allows you to go inward. Because if your eyes are open and you're like, okay, I'm just going to sit for stillness, what's happening? You're looking out the window, you're looking around the room, and okay, you're looking at the floor, there's a bit of dust there, or, oh, I need to do this, I need to make the actually closing the eyes is so beautiful, because it takes you on that inner journey. And suddenly you can't see. You're not looking around at the distractions, but just notice how many times you feel distracted, like, oh God, this is hard. This is hard. Okay, that's fine. This feels hard. This feels challenging. And without judgment, but just notice it and really allow yourself to be in that stillness and that discomfort that you might feel, even just for 1 minute. And then eventually, when you keep coming back to it, it does get easier. But it's like anything, like going to the gym, you can't lift weights, heavy weights straight away. You would never be able to, like, you know, bench press, whatever it is, the first time you went. You build that up. It's the same with anything. But I always say to people, go inward, close down the eyes, and just notice what happens when you breathe into your heart. What happens when you breathe into your lungs? Like, how does that feel? Like, what can you hear? What do you smell? Like, connect to your senses for just 1 minute. That simple exercise, because I could sit here and say to people, okay, do 10 minutes of journaling, do 10 minutes of meditation, do some exercise, and these are all great. But if you're struggling to even sit in stillness, that's probably too much. Build it up. You can actually get so much out of 1 minute putting conscious intent behind breathing in and out for 1 minute than actually just forcing something that is not even, that you're not even fully embodying. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I love that. Those little micro rituals as well, because actually, if you think taking that minute, starting there, do that 3 times a day. That's so profound. Even just as you were speaking, I just closed my eyes, breathed into my heart, and just that one breath, I reconnected. I was back in that space,
Grounding.
back in my body. I could feel, yeah.
For sure, there are so many tools, right? This is the thing. There's so much free resources. You just need to look up YouTube, nervous system regulation, breath work, meditation, there's millions of pieces of free information and resources, yet people don't do it, Tanya. People don't do it because there is this real fear within of the unknown, of the, well, what does what will my life look like if I go on that journey? So many people are like, oh, I want to be more connected, I want to feel more inner peace. But actually 95% is the subconscious that's running the show. And if that's like, well, actually it's not safe, or and again, it's sometimes it's that fear, but fear of what will happen if I really tune in to myself. And so sometimes that's just too much. So I say to people, Just try for 1 minute. Like really breathe, and that's it. Just breathe, and then make it 2 minutes. Make it 3 minutes, and just breathe, and then add on. Notice how much calmer you feel even with just 1 minute in through the nose, and imagining, if you're quite a visual person, I like to imagine new sort of life force energy, this new fresh breath moving in through my nostrils and filling up my chest. And as I breathe out, like really exhaling slowly, exaggerating the sort of exhale, breathing away tension from the body. So new life force energy in, and release, release, release. And you might even want to say like release, release, release in 1 minute. And if I promise you, if you do that for like 1 minute, that 1 minute can regulate your nervous system for up to 6 hours. 1 minute. And you said it 3 times a day, but you're not used to doing it. You need to set little reminders. It is life-changing. It is life-healing, this work. It creates, so many people are, I want to trust myself. I don't trust myself. I give all my power away. I think everyone knows better than me. Yeah, because you spend no time in your body. You spend no time in your body. You give your power away. And do you know what happens? Everyone, I've yet to meet a person to prove me wrong on this one, right? Everyone, like, they think that everyone knows better than them. They give their power away. They're disconnected from their body, and they feel like there's something missing. I've run events where there's been hundreds of people in the room, and I've said, who feels like they're doing all the things, but they feel like there's something inside. There's just something not connecting. There's something missing. This doesn't feel like it. 100% of people put their hand up. 100% of people. And what that is they're so in the head. They're trying to conform. They believe that everyone has the answers. There's a secret sauce out there. But actually, goodness me, you are the magic. You are the magic. And when you can really create a safe space, and that is with your body, with your breath, and that's how you start it. When you create safety, there is this real knowing and trust that, okay, I'm going to still face challenge because I'm a human being. I will still face grief. I will still face sadness. But you know what? I know that I'll get through it. I deeply trust myself. I know that the answers are within. And that is the magic, but that is not coming from anything that you are trying to numb out with, that any other person that you think knows more than you. No one on this planet knows you more than you know you. So stop outsourcing and start connecting with the magic that you have in. Like, you are the medicine. You're looking for medicine outside. Stop. Your medicine is you. You're the medicine. And all you need to do is just start by saying, do you know what I'm going to start? I'm going to do 1 minute, and then I'm going to do 2 minutes, and then I'm going to do 3. And I promise you, if you do that every day, your life will change, because you won't force anything. The answers will come. The knowing will come. The trust will come. And no matter who's telling you something different outside of you, you're like, I get what they're saying, but let me just check in with myself. You close down your eyes, you take a few deep breaths, and it'll be a yes or a no, and you will just know. And that's freedom. And that's what everyone wants, but not a lot of people do. And it's free.
Oh, I love that. Really building that body connection, and then that insight and trust that comes. You made me think, I've got a client, shout out to Charlotte, and she came out with the most profound, and she allowed me to share this because I was like, wow, I love this affirmation. It was, I will listen to my body and what I want in my heart and choose that every time. And that was really rooted in that real dropping into her body and then really unearthing that insight. And then to your point around that, actually sometimes it can be, we have to be with difficult emotions and grief and stuff like that, just like you shared, 1 minute at a time, and then build it up. We can be with it, but we've got to, you mentioned the gym analogy, and I love that because it is about doing like little mindful push-ups to really start to build that muscle of actually, can I be with this after perhaps, a whole lifetime, literally since, as you shared, since we were babies, of being taught to punch down on those emotions, to suppress, to numb. And I think that's so, so profound. And like you shared, it's not to say this work, because I don't think either of us are saying this work is easy. It's so simple. But the practice of just taking that minute is simple and profound. But to your point, after a lifetime of, I think for us, it was particularly when like phones came in, like in our teens, and then sort of like eventually then smartphones and stuff like that. But after however many decades of distraction, it does take practice. It takes commitment. But actually, I love that sort of real rooting. I really rooted into the simplicity of the practice that you shared of set that timer 1 minute, but you need that commitment to really reap those rewards. So beautiful.
Yeah. Commit to you, because who's more important than you? Like, seriously, like if you don't, like, you don't show up your best self, no one gets the fully most expressed version of you. Like, if you don't, like, and I have this huge passion about, and we do this in the work that I do, is bringing everything that we do when we work with a client is, how do we bring that client back to their authenticity? You know, sometimes when you work with someone, it's like, okay, let's focus on this goal and achieve this thing. But actually, is this really in alignment with who you are? Is this really in alignment with your authenticity? And so the more connected to yourself and the more safety and trust that you cultivate within yourself, and that's an inside out, like as within, so without, the easier that is. Do you know what I mean? We're so we're we care less about the material things, and we actually are like, okay, well, I'm supposed to want that, but actually, do I really want that? Like, what do I really, really want? And that's something that people don't really spend enough time checking in with. Well, I'm supposed to want that, and I guess if I have that, but Tanya, you only need to look at celebrities, and I've worked with celebrities, people in the public eye that have on paper look like they are smashing life. Okay. They are doing all the things, and everyone looks at them and thinks, oh my gosh. And they feel so disconnected and so lonely. And so, yeah, they're like, they're one of the 100 people that put their hand up in the room and go, I feel like there's something missing. And it's the missing piece is the connection to your magic, to your authenticity, to your essence, to who you are, to your core. Without all that, and when you can start to really tune in and love that part, oh my gosh, you can handle anything. Yeah, it's not easy, because do you know what? We live in a world where everything is thrown at us. Consumption is just unbelievable, like what we are seeing, what we're consuming. But when we have that practice, we get to go like, actually, oh, I can feel myself getting pulled in that direction. I don't want to go there. What do I really need right now? What do I really need? And have that confidence to start to speak that into the world. Because that's the only way, if everyone, if anyone wants freedom, the only way you're going to get freedom is to actually tune into your true essence and your authenticity and start to live that way. But the only way to get there is to create those practices that we're talking about. No matter how much you consume, how much you achieve, how many boxes you tick, you will never feel how you think you're going to feel, because it's not you. It's not in line with your essence. And that, oh my goodness, that is for me freedom. And I'm so, obviously you can tell I'm passionate about it. How do we show more people how to connect to their authenticity, Tanya? Like, how do we create that for people and show them how to do that?
Oh, connecting people into authenticity, Jill. That is so powerful. So, so powerful. I could honestly talk to you for hours. I could do a 6-hour podcast with you and turn it into an audiobook. Honestly, I have taken so much from this conversation. But within Death in the Daily, we acknowledge, much like our emotions and every experience in life, this conversation too is impermanent. So I'm so sad that it's now time to bring it to its ending. And before we do, I would love, Jill, for you to share any final words, as well as how can our listeners come find you and find out more about what you do and how they can interconnect in with your offerings.
I think just to finalise it, and we've kind of touched on it, but whatever you're feeling right now, it is not permanent. Remember, your heart can hold it all. You are so much more powerful than you give yourself credit for. Emotions are there to be felt. Allow yourself to feel it. Don't do it all at once, one day at a time, 1 minute at a time. But know that the more connected to your essence, your authenticity you are, the freer you feel. And that does require dancing with your shadow, but have fun dancing with that shadow, right? Because it's not separate from you and there are no bad parts. And how people can connect with me. So I do have a podcast as well. It's called She Loves Herself. We're just going to year four of that podcast, which is wild. And wow. Predominantly I have my business is called the Intuitive Psychology Association, and we are a coach training academy, as Tanya shared at the start. And I created that with my business partner because I've been a coach for a long time and I'm an accredited coach, but I always knew surface level was never for me. It was always, how do we work with the whole person, the past, the present and the future, and really bring people back to their authenticity. So we train and accredit coaches on how to do that, because I couldn't work with all the people I wanted to work with. So actually, how do we show people and teach people how to empower their clients to be able to do this for themselves? So I love it. That's how. So I'll give Tanya the links, and just the Intuitive Psychology Association online, or at we.r.ipa on Instagram, or you can get me on my Instagram at just Jill Coaching.
Amazing, Jill. Thank you so much. We'll put all of the links in the show notes. And I know, Jill, I know all about the IPA. I would say for anyone who's listening to this podcast and thinking, oh, is coaching somewhere that I might want to go to or to add to your skill set, definitely check out the work that Jill is doing. It's so profound and the real true change making in this world. So Jill, I'm so grateful to you for joining me in conversation today.
Thank you so much. I've loved it. Thank you so much.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something